I can only give what I am. I have no other gift to give. If I want the world to be perfect, and who does not, I have failed only because I did not know that I could never see it perfect until I myself become perfect. If I am not perfect, I cannot see perfection, but the day that I become it, I beautify my world because I see it through my own eyes. Unto the pure, all things are pure. From Titus chapter 1, verse 15. No two here can tell me that you have heard the same message any one night. The one thing that you must do is hear what I say through that which you are. It must be filtered through your prejudices, your superstitions, and your concept of self. Whatever you are, it must come through that and be colored by what you are. If you are disturbed, you would like me to be something other than what I appear to be. Then you must be that which you want me to be. We must become the thing that we want others to be, or we will never see them be it. Your consciousness, my consciousness, is the only true foundation in the world. This is that which is called Peter in the Bible, not a man. This faithfulness that cannot turn to anyone, that cannot be flattered when you are told by men you are John, come again. That is very flattering to be told you are John the Baptist, come again, or the great prophet Elias or Jeremiah. Then I deafen my ears to this very flattering little bit of news men would give me, and I ask myself, but honestly, who am I? If I can deny the limitations of my birth, my environment, and the belief that I am but an extension of my family tree, and feel within myself that I am Christ, and sustain this assumption until it takes a central place and forms the habitual center of my energy, I will do the works attributed to Jesus. Without thought or effort, I will mold a world in harmony with that perfection which I have assumed and feel springing within me. When I open the eyes of the blind, unstop the ears of the deaf, give joy for mourning and beauty for ashes, then and only then have I truly established this vine deep within. That is what I would automatically do were I truly conscious of being Christ. It is said of this presence, he proved that he was Christ by his works. Our ordinary alterations of consciousness as we pass from one state to another are not transformations, because each of them is so rapidly succeeded by another in the reversed direction. But whenever our assumption grows so stable as to definitely expel its rivals, then that central habitual concept defines our character and is a true transformation. Jesus, or enlightened reason, saw nothing unclean in the woman taken in adultery. He said to her, hath no man condemned thee? From John chapter 8, verse 10. She said, no man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. From John chapter 8, verse 11. No matter what is brought before the presence of beauty, it sees only beauty. Jesus was so completely identified with the lovely that he was incapable of seeing the unlovely. When you and I really become conscious of being Christ, we too will straighten the arms of the withered and resurrect the dead hopes of men. We will do all the things that we could not do when we felt ourselves limited by our family tree. It is a bold step and should not be taken lightly, because to do it is to die. John, the man of three dimensions, is beheaded or loses his three-dimensional focus that Jesus, the fourth-dimensional self, may live. Any enlargement of our concept of self involves a somewhat painful parting and strongly rooted hereditary conceptions. The ligaments are strong that hold us in the womb of conventional limitations. All that you formerly believed, you no longer believe. You know now that there is no power outside of your own consciousness. Therefore, you cannot turn to anyone outside of self. You have no ears for the suggestion that something else has power in it. You know the only reality is God, and God is your own consciousness. There is no other God. Therefore, on this rock, you build the everlasting church and boldly assume you are this divine being, self-begotten, because you dared to appropriate that which was not given to you in your cradle a concept of self, not formed in your mother's womb, a concept of self conceived outside of the offices of man. The story is beautifully told us in the Bible using the two sons of Abraham, one blessed, Isaac, born outside of the offices of man, and the other, Ismail, born in bondages. Sarah was too much to beget a child, so her husband Abraham went unto the bond servant Hagar, the pilgrim, and she conceived of the old man and bore him a son called Ismail. Ismail's hand was against every man, and every man's hand against him. Every child born of woman is born into bondage, born into all that his environment represents, regardless of whether it be the throne of England, the White House, or any great place in the world. Every child born of women is personified as this Ismail, the child of Hagar. But asleep in every child is the blessed Isaac, who is born outside of the offices of man and is born through faith alone. This second child has not earthly father. He is self-begotten. What is the second birth? I find myself man. I cannot go back into my mother's womb, and yet I must be born a second time. Except a man be born again, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. From John chapter 3, verse 3. I quietly appropriate that which no man can give me, no woman can give me. I dare to assume I am God. This must be of faith. This must be of promise. Then I become the blessed. I become Isaac. As I begin to do the things that only this presence could do, I know that I am born out of the limitations of Ishmael, and I have become hired to the kingdom. Ishmael could not inherit anything, although his father was Abraham or God. Ishmael did not have both parents of the godly. His mother was Hagar, the bondwoman, and so he could not partake of his father's estate. You are Abraham and Sarah, and contained within your own consciousness there is one waiting for recognition. In the Old Testament it is called Isaac, and in the New Testament it is called Jesus. And it is born without the aid of man. No man can tell you that you are Christ Jesus. No man can tell you and convince you that you are God. You must toy with the idea and wonder what it would be like to be God. No clear conception of the origin of phenomena is possible except that consciousness is all and all is consciousness. Nothing can be evolved from man that was not potentially involved in his nature. The ideal we serve and hope to attain could never be evolved from us were it not potentially involved in our nature. Let me now retell and emphasize an experience of mine printed by me 2 years ago under the title The Search. I think it will help you to understand this law of consciousness and show you that you have no one to change but yourself, for you are incapable of seeing other than the contents of your own consciousness. Once in an idle interval at sea, I meditated on the perfect state and wondered what I would be were I of two pure eyes to behold iniquity. If to me all things were pure and were I without condemnation. As I became lost in this fiery brooding, I found myself lifted above the dark environment of the senses. So intense was the feeling, I felt myself a being of fire dwelling in a body of air. Voices as from a heavenly chorus with the exaltation of those who had been conquerors in a conflict with death were singing, "He is risen, he is risen," and intuitively I knew they meant me. Then I seemed to be walking in the night. I soon came upon a scene that I might have been the ancient pool of Bethesda, for in this place lay a great multitude of impotent folk, blind, halt, withered, waiting not for the moving of the water as of tradition, but waiting for me. As I came near, without thought or effort on my part, they were one after the other molded as by the magician of the beautiful. Eyes, hands, feet, all missing members were drawn from some invisible reservoir and molded in harmony with that perfection which I felt springing within me. When all were made perfect, the chorus exulted, "It is finished." I know this vision was the result of my intense meditation upon the idea of perfection. for my meditations invariably bring about union with the state contemplated. I had been so completely absorbed within the idea that for a while I had become what I contemplated, and the high purpose with which I had for that moment identified myself drew the companionship of high things and fashioned the vision in harmony with my inner nature. The ideal with which we are united works by association of ideas to awaken a thousand moods to create a drama in keeping with the central idea. My mystical experiences have convinced me that there is no way to bring about the perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. As soon as we succeed in transforming ourselves, the world will melt magically before our eyes and reshape itself in harmony with that which our transformation affirms. We fashion the worlds that surrounds us by the intensity of our imagination and feeling, and we illuminate or darken our lives by the concepts we hold of ourselves. Nothing is more important to us than our conception of ourselves, and especially is true of our concept of the deep, dimensionally greater one within us. Those that help or hinder us, whether they know it or not, are the servants of the law, which shapes itself outward circumstances in harmony with our inner nature. It is our conception of ourselves which frees or constrains us, though it may use material agencies to achieve its purpose. Because life molds the outer world to reflect the inner arrangement of our minds, there is no way of bringing about the outer perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. No help cometh from without. The hills to which we lift our eyes are those of an inner range. It is thus by to our consciousness that we must turn as to the only reality, the only foundation on which all phenomena can be explained. We can rely absolutely on the justice of this law to give us only that which is of the nature of ourselves. To attempt to change the world before we change our concept of ourselves is to struggle against the nature of things. There can be no outer change until there is first an inner change. As within, so without. I am not advocating philosophical indifference when I suggest that we should imagine ourselves as already that which we want to be, living in a mental atmosphere of greatness, rather than using physical means and arguments to bring about the desired changes. Everything we do, unaccompanied by a change of consciousness, is but futile readjustment of surfaces. However we toil or struggle, we can receive no more than our concepts of self affirm. To protest against anything which happens to us is to protest against the law of our being and our rulership over our own destiny. The circumstances of my life are too closely related to my conception of myself not to have been formed by my own spirit from some dimensionally larger storehouse of my being. If there is pain to me in these happenings, I should look within myself for the cause, for I am moved here and there and made to live in a world in harmony with my concept of myself. If we would become an emotionally aroused over our ideas as we become over our dislikes, we would ascend to the plane of our ideal as easily as we now descend to the level of our hates. Love and hate have a magical transforming power, and we grow through their exercise into the likeness of what we contemplate. By intensity of hatred, we create in ourselves the character we imagine in our enemies. Qualities die for want of attention, so the unlovely states might best be rubbed out by imagining. Beauty for ashes and joy for mourning, rather than by direct attacks on the state from which we would be free. Whatsoever things are lovely and of good report, think on these things, for we become that which we are and rapport. There is nothing to change but for concept of self. As soon as we succeed in transforming self, our world will dissolve and reshape itself in harmony with that which our change affirms. I, by descent in consciousness, have brought about the imperfection that I see. In the divine economy, nothing is lost. We cannot lose anything save by descent in consciousness from the sphere where the thing has its own natural life.